So we're going to start with our bunny and adding the fur. I'll pull the paint over here. I'm using my lunar blender. I'll start in the middle so you see a big section done. We're going to wet coat. Pardon me. So I'm just pulling in sand gray. That's what we base coated our little guy with. I give my brush a little wipe or scuff. I pick up some of my cobblestone. And you see how I'll curve following the direction of his belly. All bellies curve. Pick up a bit more, come from the bottom up. And you just kind of scratch off. You don't want it a straight line along a section. I'll scuff my brush and I'm now picking up raw umber. Now you can see in your photo just as easy where the dark is, or we'll call it where it's darker. We are going to be, now my intention here is not to cover all of my cobblestone. You know, I don't want to come completely down and wipe out all the cobblestone. So I just lightly scuff my way upwards. It's kind of a scratch back and forth, nice and soft. And I'm not pressing hard. That's the big key, I think. Now, I've wiped my brush off really good. I can pick up warm white and come in the middle with some of that and my brush, just to give a few scratchies. But we are going to use the warm white with our rake, or comb, or grainer. We have a 1/8 filbert grainer by Princeton. We have a rake. This is a Lowell Cornell 1/8, and you see we always scrunch them, so we want them to wisp out. So I'm going to pick up some of my warm white. I have my brush a little wet, so it's going to thin it. And then I'll just take it and just lightly in the center, unevenly again, so that it kind of goes up a little higher here and there, a little lower, so that we're really just adding a highlight. And you'll do this in the middle of everything. Now, the thing about this section, or this step, pardon me, I guess we'll call it, is that we're only going to be doing this on the tops of everything. We can wait and do this at the end on all of them with the filbert, or with the rake. So we can go ahead and do the 3 steps, everything we want to do with our lunar blender first. So you're going to go ahead and we're going to do all of these sections. I'm going to have you go ahead and do these, but I'm going to save the face part as another video, okay, or as another come up and see thing. So we're going to be doing, I'm going to be doing a couple things. So I'll just do a quick on the ear. We're going to add long little strokes with our liner on the ears afterwards. So I'm going to bring a little underneath as well. And again, I'll just take a bit of the cobblestone. We're just doing exactly what we did. And I want to have it a little darker. And again, I'm not pressing hard. And I'll just kind of scoop up here with what's left on the brush. That's just giving the ear a base right now. We're going to do some dry brushing and that in there, but before we pull any little hair on. So I would do the same thing here. Now we had a lot of people that trace the ear all the way into this line. I never should put those on the pattern because it really throws people off. And you can never follow those when you're doing doing curlies anyways. Never try to completely follow those. So again, scrunch. It's more to get a little dark at the base of it.
Really screwed up on that ear.
You won't be alone. There were a few people that had basted into that section.
I think I did.
Yeah, not to worry. Okay, so now I've done that, and now we're going to come up the face. So we're coming up the middle of the face. And I'll just scratch it outwards like so. You're coming right from in the nose. I'm going to take my cobblestone. You can use your 1/8 inch if you feel better with it. And I'll bring a little cobblestone from the top down. I want the center to remain light on his nose. And then I'll come with the raw umber. So this is going to be behind his cheek patches. It doesn't matter if I get it on the cheek patches. These little bangs that he has come down over top. I'll scuff that out. I'm going to switch to my 1/8 because I'm going to pick up white and I'm going to come along around the eye. So you see it's up the side, across the top, and down the side, and just kind of wisp this side thing out a little bit. And we're going to take some raw umber. I'm just skipping right to raw umber. And I'll just scratch in a few little, we will be doing all that with our liner or our rake, whichever you choose. So it's going to wisp into that white. So we end up with a fair bit of white around the eyes, and that's what we want. I'll wisp that white again because I kind of brought my raw umber a little close. And then I'm going to take just a little bit of white in the middle here. Just softly scratch back and forth. So that is his face. Now we're going to be doing his cheeks. I'm going to start by my wet coat in the middle with the sand gray. Wipe. Put white at the cheek ends. They pretty much touch. They surround the nose and the mouth. We're going to fill that mouth in nice and dark after. And you see that his little cheeks go up like that. And then I'm going to pick up a little raw umber, and I'm going to come from here and streak into, just with the chisel of my brush, I'm still using my lunar, into that sand color, wipe my brush, flip it there, and I'll just nice and softly. So you see how it's going from white to dark? Mm-hmm. Okay, so now again, I'm going to come with a little bit. Now, of course, because I'm talking, I've probably dried out my sand gray that was in the middle. So all I would do is pick up a little sand gray on the side of the brush. So do you see how that works? So I can re-wet. So if you happen to be talking as well, you can just, or, you know, I've got a little brush, a little something in there. It's driving me bonkies. A little hair. There we go. He's going to get whiskers. I don't need to put those on. Well, now his little mustache is nicely over top of there. Okay, so that is what we're doing here for his little mustache, we'll call it. And then underneath here, I'm just going to put in a bit of a base. again, I'm going to double load with the raw umber, and that just, because that worked well. All I want is a bit of a base. We're going to be pulling these hairs in. They're going to twist upwards and all over the place. But I just want to have a little darker, not much, just a little bit of dark. So I just lightly scratch that. That's all I need for a base on his little brows, okay? And we will be cleaning up his eyes and everything. All right, that's your mission.
But you're not going to get your ears.
We're going to take, and we're going to take Terra Coral. It's okay. And I'm going to dry brush. I'm using my lunar blender, 1/4-inch lunar blender. You can use your 1/4-inch dome stippler, whichever you want. We want it a little stronger down at the bottom and fade it upwards. So this is a nice soft dry brush on the ears. Now I don't have very much left. I'm going to come down and I'm going to put it in where my nose is going to be. I don't want it to be a painted nose. I want it to have that pink implication. And then nice and soft, I'm going to bring a little bit over on his cheeks. Now this is going to have whiskers, and it's going to have little fine lines with our liner put on to bring on all those crazy wacky hair that he's going to have. So we don't want it to be too bold, but we want it to show up. Now once we've got this done, I want to take a little raw umber on the same brush, scuff it off, and I want to dry brush some raw umber at the base of the ear. Just to dirty that up a bit. It just kind of puts a bit of a shadow over it. Do you see it compared to this side? It's just a little raw umber. Not lots. And just kind of fade that scratchy coming upwards. So it just darkens that at the base of his ears. We're going to put little eyelashes. Make him a little Miss Maybelline. His bangs come down and cover a lot of this. So you can make them as skinny fine as you like. So there's no shading, there's no anything like that on his eyes. His little wispy hair, you can go back and forth between all of your colors. It just needs to be thinned. So what I mean by that is his little bangs are going to have some, say here I've got sand gray in there. And I might take sand gray and come up off of his ears and bring a little off the ear. I could take a little cobblestone. And you're thinning everything down. So it's all going to be thinned down. We want wispy. Everybody's is going to be different because it's going to depend. And now the warm white. And of course, because my brush is dirty, it'll never be a stark white. But you can make them as wispy as you like. But you see how we see that background through there? That was just a, and when we put some raw umber ones on, which we have to clean the brush between raw umber and white. One might think that's a good plan. And we'll pull a few little wispy hair. And it's always got to be thin enough that it just flows off your brush. And you can make as much as you like. Now, these little hair that you may have transferred on are actually coming off of his bangs. Like I made his bangs come up like curly, wispy looking little characters. But you see where we bring the dark coming from, it's going to look like it's darker under the peas. And it depends on how crazy you make those. You'll never, doing hair, you'll never do two the same. So you'll come through here with some sand gray and cobblestone, raw umber, whichever. All of the colors that we've used. It doesn't matter. And then I'm going to bring in some white. So I'll do the same thing off the edge of my ears. You're going to make them as funky as you like, or as toned down as you like. The same thing off of the ends of his little mustachy thing and these little hair up here. You see how we'll pull those out. So they're just little wisps that come off the edge. But it's all of a sudden it makes those little eyes wake right up. And he's got the white ones. And this is where, see how I can bring that one right up under his eye, right? Right along there. And that kind of just frames in his little eye. We have thin down, raw umber, little dots for our whiskers, and I quite often blot those when I put them on so that they're just dulled down a little bit. So you can have as many little whisker lines as you like. I'll just put in these ones in the background. Now we want to come in and bring whiskers that head off, right? Don't start and stop them at the same place. They have, some are longer, some are shorter, some wisp right across that carrot. Every one will be different. And you may feel it's better, it's whatever's good for you, but it may be better for you to pull towards yourself. You have more control with a liner when you're pulling towards yourself. So, and any of this, you can add more little hairs with your liner than you had with your comb. It doesn't matter. I'll add these little markings for his claws on the bottom of his feet. They're coming up. These are coming down because his hands are turned. It's just those little markings right there. So I'll do the same thing on this side, make them all wispy. And you see how my white kind of faded in here a little bit. Remember we brought that white around there? I'll kind of crisp that up a little bit because you do want to see that white. Mine kind of blended right in. So a couple more white. So it's when you're working with a color, you'll go everywhere with it. All right. We're going to double load our brush, a 1/4 flat in avocado and celery. And I'm going to start at the back of my leaves. It doesn't matter if you have it transferred on. If you feel you need to, then you can. And I'm just going to wiggle to create the back row. So we just want to have light upwards and dark down. And then I complete the second row, overlaps, right? And I want it to come down nice and dark at the stem. So I'm going to come from the other end, come right up the middle. So we've got overlapping lines there. I'm going to pick up a little of the celery shoot just to give a little bright here and there. And I'm just going to come over the edge. I put it on the light side of my brush, and I'm just going to pick a couple spots to do that light, just so that it lightens up the edge a little bit. So that is our greenery on the turnip. We're going to double load our 1/4 inch with plantation pine and lighthouser green. And I'm just going to chisel. Don't press hard. We want to keep these little scratchy lines. So we want the dark down towards the bottom dark on my brush, that means. So you see the dark and the light. We're referring to the dark down, our light up. And I'll just kind of do some chiselly lines. And then you come back up this side. So your object is flatten your brush with the chisel every time you load. And you're not pressing hard. You're just bringing this corn husks. Now it depends on where you positioned your piece on the board as to how much corn husk you have laying there. Then I'm going to just give my brush a bit of a wipe, pick up celery shoot on the light part of the brush. And I'm just going to scratch in a couple of light celery. There. So that's what I want you to do to your corn. I'm going to thin down celery shoot, and with my liner I'm going to bring the corn silk off, the first layer of corn silk. And we want this to be nice and fine, so that's the thin down. I'm using my number 1 liner, but you can even go finer. So I'm putting this corn silk that it's coming off the edges of my corn, coming from underneath, right? That's where we want it to look like it's coming from underneath. Then I'm going to pick up, and I don't need to clean the brush, but thin it down, buttermilk. So each time I load again, I'll end up with more buttermilk and less of the celery shoot on there. And you want it to get a little heavy in a few spots as well. But that's our corn silk. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up on my number 1 liner, I'm going to pick up avocado and lighthouser. So I've picked up both colors, and I'm going to start and I'm going to press in. So the colors, one of these is actually our stem. So we'll say that one's our stem. We're not needing to worry about having absolute lines traced on. If you have them, you can follow them. So there's our greenery for our tomato. Now we pick up a little bit on the edge of the brush I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of celery shoot, and I'm just going to add a little highlight line here and there. Doesn't matter where, you can choose, and highlight a swipe on your pieces. We're going to do one more thing in this demo, and that's going to be our carrot. So what we're doing for carrot greenery is we're double loading plantation pine and lighthouser green. And I'll just pull a few lines up if I feel I want a stem. It's not important that I have those. And I'm going to have a double load.
Maybe.
And I'm just going to you see how I just dab? You can slide backwards. We just want to have lighter green and darker green. So I almost kind of rock on my liner, or pardon me, fan. This is the mini fan, the 20-0 fan from Princeton. So we double load and pull these in. And these are just, like I say, there's no, we want to have little jagged looking, and they come down to that one stem, and we'll bring it right onto the carrot. Okay, so you'll come through, you'll jab these all in, and then we pick up a little tiny bit of celery shoot and add a little tiny bit light here and there. Now my students can go back to their table and do it. They've been trying to dash away and I keep adding more. We're going to shade our peas, so I started on one pea already, the background of that pea. So now I'm going to take and I'm going to come along and I'm going to shade along the bottom of the peas. So I did it on the one behind, and then we're going to shade the bottoms. If I want this pea in front, see how I'll shade like so? That guy is tucked behind, so I'll just leave him back there. And then this guy here, keep it on the pea, Wendy. So we'll just shade like so. I'm going to give that a really quick little dry. The heat gun dries it up nice and quick. I'm going to take and I'm going to dry brush with celery shoot. So we dry brush down the middle. I use a 1/4 inch dome stippler or a 1/8 dome stippler, or I use a rect lunar blender, which I appear to have quite a few of those in my collection. I can use my 1/8 and I got it out to do it, but turns out I'm okay with this guy. So I do the corners of those. And I'm going to take a liner and I'm going to add a line down my peas. I'm actually going to use celery for the line down the peas because I don't want it to be too bright. And that's not showing at all on here. I'm going to go celery with a bit of celery shoot. We're going to
there you go.
retract, but I didn't want it that bright. But he'll probably die down. We'll just go with that. We're going to do a celery shoot highlight on the tops of the peas. And then we have to do our curly in the background. Now, I did have those transferred on, but you never want to transfer those on because it's not good to just follow them. You want to take your liner up on the tip and come and swirl and do your curly. If you're trying to follow an exact line that you have there, you run into a lot of problems. So we keep our liner standing up and we put some curls in there. And now you see how this one skips out? That's the light highlighting off them. You don't go back and try to paint that back on. I'll erase those ones that I have transferred in the background and just leave the curly ones that I put on there. So I do want to show one quick little bit of shading. So this is shading with raw umber, nice and soft. So I do not want a bold shading. If you have a hard time with that, you can take and you can use a blending gel and put a gel on your brush. But I'll come in here and I'm going to shade the bottom of his nose. I'll shade under his mustache a bit. Maybe I'll come in and shade a little. But the whole thing with this is we want to strengthen up where the bends, we'll call them, are on our bunny. So I'll come down here. If it's not dark enough, you shade. And it really doesn't matter if you shade on him or not, because he does have already that look that you can see where his feet are. But if you shade a few places, you have to shade them all. That's the way it is. You can't just shade one paw and then not go in and shade the other. Now, You can shade on your carrots if you want to strengthen them. Anything with the raw umber will work with this piece. So it's nice and thin. I like to come in and put a little bit of shading just kind of where we have some what we call V's. So there's a V here, there's one here, just a little. They make our bunny look like he's not floating. I haven't done his little tail yet, just a little jabbies in his tail, so it's nothing spectacular. So you see how that, I don't go all the way up around his head though either, but you see how that gives him the look that he is not just floating there anywhere. So I've got a V in here by the carrots. So I'll nice and softly shade in that V, and I'll come over by the turnip. And it's very faint. It's one of those things you see it and you don't. But it does tend to stop everything from, I'll just come in here with a bit more. See, I call this a V. Walk it out. Walk it out. I can come up here a little bit on the cabbage, and it's right on the edge there. So that's my shading, nice and soft with the raw umber.